When President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. was withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accords last week, liberals claimed the decision was a huge blow to the planet. Headlines roared things like, "Paris climate deal's demise means Steve Bannon wins and the planet loses." Former President Barack Obama even said in a statement that the U.S. was abdicating its leadership role and criticized the Trump administration for rejecting the future. But is that actually true? Here are just the facts. Of course, there are still a lot of open questions about what percentage of global climate change is due to man-made activity, what portion is just part of the cyclical change of climates that Earth has always experienced, and what portion is due to increased solar activity. But it's not even necessary to get into those disputes, because even if you believe that man-made climate change is real, the Paris Accords were doomed to failure even according to their own terms. In fact, the entire deal was a massive waste of money and jobs that had absolutely no hope of accomplishing its stated objectives. According to the text of the actual Paris Agreement, the goal of the agreement is to hold the global increase in average temperature to less than 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and less than 1.5 degrees Celsius if at all possible. But there's a problem. Global average temperatures are already 0.9 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, and according to climate experts, heat that is stored in the Earth's oceans but has not yet been released means that another 0.4 to 0.6 degrees of warming is already on the way, even if all of mankind immediately stopped all carbon emissions on the spot today. In other words, before the Paris Climate Accords even took effect, it was inevitable that they would fail to meet their goal, according to the very same scientists who say the Paris Accords are necessary. Even the most generous estimates of the beneficial effects of the Paris Accords suggest that it would only mitigate about 0.2 degrees Celsius of global warming. What's more, even those estimates rest on a number of assumptions that are pretty shaky. The first of which is that without the Paris Accord, green or renewable energy sources won't even go forward in the United States. Now, that's exactly what environmentalists predicted when George W. Bush withdrew the U.S. from the Kyoto Protocols in 2001. But, as the Wall Street Journal notes, since the withdrawing from the Kyoto Protocols, the United States has actually reduced carbon emissions faster than the European companies that stayed in the Kyoto Protocols due to market-based business innovation. See, the U.S. and other Western countries are already introducing more green and renewable energy sources independent of this agreement. Paris just made them feel better about doing so. The continuing problem of carbon emissions lies mostly with developing countries that still rely on outdated forms of energy generation to fuel their economies. Now, the Paris Accords supposedly solve this problem by asking rich countries like the United States to contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to a green climate fund to encourage poorer countries to develop and use green technology. Sounds great, right? Well, no. Overwhelmingly, third world countries have corrupt governments that lack transparency. Even climate change advocates acknowledge that the recipients of these funds present a huge risk, that the corrupt governments of these countries will simply take the money and spend it on something else. In fact, the top 10 recipients of funds from the Paris Accord slush fund are often ranked by global watchdog organizations as being among the most corrupt kleptocracies on Earth, raising the very high possibility that these funds won't even go toward climate change problems at all, but rather will merely enrich the cronies of corrupt third world dictatorships. So while the Paris Accord had no hope of meeting its target, and while the benefits of sending a ton of money to corrupt countries in order to allegedly pay for green energy are pretty uncertain, what's not uncertain is that the compliance with the Paris Accords would have been tremendously costly to the U.S. in both economic growth and jobs. Now, in conclusion, even if you believe that man-made global warming is real, the Paris Accords were an extremely costly measure that would have done little or nothing to address the problem, but would have been extremely costly to American businesses and taxpayers, and very likely would have served to prop up third world dictatorships that are hostile to American interests. So, withdrawing from such an agreement sounds like the best possible deal for the planet, doesn't it?